The winter sun had barely risen over the dusty plains when Luke Tanner saddled up his tired mare and headed east across the valley. He wasn't a man of many words, nor one who believed in miracles anymore. Years of drought and loneliness had hardened him, leaving only his barn, his land, and a ghost of a dream that maybe one day he'd find peace on this forgotten stretch of the frontier. The wind carried a chill that morning, whispering through the brittle grass, carrying with it something strange silence. Even the crows were gone. Luke slowed his horse as he spotted something small moving near the dried-up creek. Bet a scrap of life. In the middle of all that emptiness, he dismounted and walked closer, his boots sinking into soft earth. That's when he saw him, a small native boy, no older than 8, curled up in the dirt, skin pale beneath layers of dust, ribs showing through his torn shirt. His eyes dark and hollow, barely opened when Luke knelt beside him. "Hey there, kid," Luke said quietly, reaching for his canteen. The boy drank in trembling gulps until the canteen was half empty. Luke looked around the empty valley. No tribe, no tracks, no family. The boy was alone. Luke sighed. "Guess you're coming with me." He wrapped the child in his old poncho, lifted him onto the mare, and walked them both back toward the ranch. The barn creaked as the wind picked up, and Luke could feel eyes on him even though he saw no one. He fed the boy a bit of bread, warmed some beans over the fire, and watched him eat like he hadn't seen food in days. When the boy finally fell asleep by the fire, Luke studied him. His small hands were rough, his face marked with faint bruises, and his hair tangled from dust and wind. He looked like he'd seen more pain than most grown men. Morning came with a blood-orange sunrise. Luke held up his hands. "Easy, kid. You're safe here." The boy watched him carefully, then whispered a single word, "Tala." "Tala," Luke repeated. "That your name?" The boy nodded. Luke spent the day tending to chores, always aware of the small figure watching him from the barn door. By sundown, Tala had started following him around, quiet but curious, mimicking his every move. When Luke chopped wood, Tala picked up a stick and did the same. When Luke brushed the horse, Tala touched its mane gently, whispering something soft in his own tongue. For the first time in years, Luke smiled. That night, as stars stretched wide across the sky, Luke sat by the fire and said, "Don't know who left you out there, kid, but you can stay till we figure something out." Tala didn't answer, only stared at the flames, his eyes reflecting the orange glow. But somewhere deep in the valley, a horn sounded, a low, distant echo that made Luke's blood run cold. He knew that sound. It wasn't wind or thunder. It was a signal. The next morning, when Luke stepped out of the barn, he froze. The horizon was alive with movement. Dust clouds rose like a storm. And then, through that golden morning light, they came hundreds of riders on horseback, their spears glinting, their war paint shining in the sun. 200 native warriors, silent and still, forming a perfect line before his ranch. Their faces were unreadable, their presence overwhelming. At their center rode a tall man with a white feathered headdress and a bow across his back. He dismounted, his boots crunching in the dirt as he approached. Luke's heart pounded in his chest. Tala stood at the barn door, clutching Luke's coat, trembling. The warrior stopped 10 feet away and looked Luke in the eye. Luke swallowed. "I didn't mean any harm," he said. "The boy was alone. I just helped him." The warrior's expression didn't change, the sound of horses snorting and leather creaking filling the silence. Then, the warrior raised his hand. Every other rider behind him dismounted at once. Dust swirled through the air like a living thing. Luke didn't move. He didn't breathe. The warrior finally spoke, his voice deep and steady. "You gave life to our chief's son." Luke blinked. "Chief's son?" The man nodded slowly. "You fed him. You covered him. You did not turn him away." Luke exhaled, the weight of realization hitting him. Tala, the boy he'd found starving in the dirt, was the son of the most powerful leader in the region. The warrior turned and raised his arm. The 200 men behind him bowed their heads in silent respect. Luke stood frozen, unsure whether he was being honored or judged. Then the warrior spoke again. "Today, we do not come for war. We come for gratitude." As the wind swept through the valley, Luke Tanner, lonely rancher of the frontier, found himself standing before an army not as an enemy, but as a man who had unknowingly saved a life, worth more than gold. The sun rose higher, burning away the morning chill, and somewhere deep inside, Luke felt something stir again. Faith, maybe, or just the beginning of something bigger than himself. The air was still thick with dust when Luke Tanner finally found his voice. The tall warrior before him, broad shoulders, weathered face painted with ash and ochre, stood as if carved from the land itself. Behind him, 200 riders waited, silent as the hills. The morning sun burned gold over the horizon, catching the steel tips of their spears and turning the scene into something half holy, half haunting. Luke's heart thundered. He wasn't sure if this was the start of a massacre or a miracle. Tala had stepped forward now, bare feet brushing the dry earth. The boy's face lit up when he saw the man in the headdress. "Father," he cried, his small voice cracking the silence like a shot. For a moment, the mighty war chief of the Arapaho was just a father, eyes glistening, holding his lost son. Luke looked away, feeling something tighten in his chest. When the embrace ended, the chief rose to his full height, still keeping one hand on Tala's shoulder. "My boy wandered from the hunting trail 3 days ago," he said, his English rough but clear. "The cold and hunger nearly took him. You saved what I could not lose." Luke nodded slowly. "Didn't do much, just fed him, kept him warm." The chief studied him with unreadable eyes. "Many white men would have left him. You did not." Luke didn't know what to say. He'd never thought himself a hero, just a man trying to do what was right. He looked at the boy, smiling now, safe in his father's shadow. Something inside Luke softened. The chief turned to his riders and barked an order in his language. At once, 4 men dismounted and began unloading something from their horses' bundles, wrapped in animal hides, shimmering with beads and furs. They laid them before Luke's barn door. "For you," the chief said, "gifts of thanks, meat, blankets, silver. Our tribe does not forget kindness." Luke was speechless. He'd never seen such craftsmanship, hand-beaded blankets, fine leather work, even a carved bow made of bone and wood. "That's too much," he said quietly. "I didn't do it for this." The chief's gaze was sharp but kind. "You did it for honor. That is rare." He paused, then added, "You have a friend among the Arapaho now, Luke Tanner." It startled Luke to hear his own name. The chief smiled faintly. "My scouts watch the valley. They know who lives and who takes from it." The riders behind him began to turn their horses, but the chief stayed. "One thing more," he said, lowering his voice. "A storm comes soon. Men from the east soldiers hunt my people. When they pass this valley, they will see only you. If they ask, you have seen nothing." Luke nodded solemnly. "You have my word." The chief looked down at his son. "Goodbye, Luke," he whispered. Luke patted his shoulder gently. "You take care now, little man." The warriors mounted up again, 200 strong, and within minutes, they melted back into the horizon like ghosts, leaving behind only hoof prints and the faint smell of sage in the wind. Luke stood there for a long while, staring at the empty valley. The world felt quieter, lighter somehow. That night, he sat by the barn fire, the boy's laughter echoing faintly in his memory. For the first time in years, he didn't feel alone. He thought about how one small act, just a piece of bread and a blanket, had changed everything. Maybe kindness was still worth something out here, even in a land built on dust and blood. 2 days later, Luke heard the distant thunder of hooves again. But this time, it wasn't the Arapaho. Blue coats flashed through the valley, U.S. cavalry soldiers, their flags whipping in the wind. Luke stepped outside, squinting as the riders approached his barn. "You the owner here?" the captain barked. Luke nodded. "That's right." The captain's eyes swept the land. "We're tracking a group of hostiles. You seen any movement out here?" Luke felt the weight of the chief's words in his chest. "When they pass this valley, they will see only you." He shook his head. "Ain't seen a soul in weeks." The captain studied him for a long moment, suspicion in his eyes. "If you're lying, you're aiding the enemy," he warned. Luke didn't flinch. "Ain't lying, Captain. Just me, my horse, and this old barn." Luke watched them go, a quiet satisfaction settling over him. For the first time in a long while, he felt proud not of his strength, but of his heart. Days passed, and life on the ranch slowly returned to its rhythm. but Luke often found himself looking toward the far hills, half expecting to see that boy again, Tala, running wild and free under the endless western sky. And sometimes, late at night, when the wind whispered through the valley, Luke could almost hear the echo of hooves and the chief's deep voice. "You have a friend among the Arapaho now." In a land where mercy was often mistaken for weakness, Luke Tanner had found something rarer than gold: respect. And in the vast silence of the Old West, that meant everything. He looked up at the stars, smiled to himself, and whispered, "Guess the world ain't all bad after all." Somewhere out in the dark, the spirit of friendship rode quietly on the wind. Subscribe to Old West Story for more true-hearted, emotional, and powerful tales from the untamed frontier, stories of courage, loyalty, and redemption that still echo through the ages.